Hi. So, this is not a video that's going to be fun to make. So I'm pretty sure that everyone by now has heard about the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And in the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination, there's been a lot of stuff online. A lot of liberals celebrating his assassination, a lot of conservatives calling for retaliation. There's also been a bit of liberals being sympathetic to conservatives in this time. And there's been a lot of conservatives really just praying for the peace, just trying to wrestle through this. And maybe so much of it is just the algorithm and the rage baiting, but it definitely seems like those negative points are getting echoed much more. The liberals who are celebrating and dancing and justifying Charlie's assassination, they're definitely getting much more attention than the ones who are condemning the assassination, than the ones who are being sympathetic. That doesn't mean that the majority of them are, but that those are the ones that are really getting more attention. And also on the conservative side, now from my experience, it has been a lot more just hurt on the conservative side and kind of more refrain. I don't really follow what, I would consider radical conservatives. I know that many liberals would consider all conservatives radical. We're going to talk about that. But the ones who are actually calling for violence, I've not seen a whole lot of that, but I know that there is a lot of them. That's just not the crowd I follow. And nor is the crowd I follow the ones that want to rage bait that either. But I do know that there is a lot on that side. And it takes me a lot of time and research to pull a whole bunch of clips together for examples. I'm not doing this, I want to just kind of get these thoughts out. This is going to be a mostly unscripted video. But I have seen, like, Destiny basically saying, yeah, conservatives need to be in hiding now. They need to be afraid at this point. And I've also seen on the other side, like Andrew Tate, just straight up calling for civil war. There is radicals on both sides. We need to address that. And as said, we're getting more of the radicals because of the rage baiting, because of the algorithms, because that's what's creating drama and tension. This is very twisted to say that this is a benefit of the doubt, but I'm hoping that a lot of this rage baiting is just that, just attention seeking, not these people's actual opinions on the matter. I hope that people are actually civil enough to have decent opinions, but that they're just enticed by the algorithms and the rage baits. All the same, whether these are people's actual genuine opinions or just clickbait, rage bait to feed the algorithm, it's creating a lot of escalation, which needs to be talked about. And, that is the thing that Charlie Kirk was known for. Talking about stuff. He was against violence. He said that we need to have tough conversations so that we don't resort to violence. So with tensions rising across America, really across the entire world, but particularly in America, it seems to be a question on everyone's mind if we're heading into civil war. And I hope not, but I think this is a video that needs to be made. So let's honor Charlie Kirk, and let's talk about this. I want to be open here. I was pretty shocked when I got the news about Charlie Kirk's assassination myself. On September 11th, when still processing his death, it was a surreal experience. I'm not sure how many people watching this remember 9/11 or were old enough to have lived through 9/11. It's weird to think that there are people in their mid-20s who were not alive when 9/11 happened. I do remember 9/11. I was 11 years old at the time. But the past week on September 11th, it was a surreal experience. Going to work and just the stillness of the air, the quietness, people's music being turned down if playing at all, few conversations, like the world was just holding its breath. And to the younger generation, I want to say that how we felt on September 11th this year was pretty similar to how we all felt on September 11th 24 years ago. Every year we have a remembrance of 9/11 to remember the terrible things that happened that year, and that we do well to honor the people who died that day and the terrible atrocity of that event. Every remembrance has really fallen short except this year, because this year really captured the sensation of what it felt like. But I think the biggest difference between this year and 2001 was back in 2001, when we would see videos of people celebrating, they were on the other side of the world. This year, they're our neighbors. And I think that has a much more intimate sting to it. On the day that Charlie Kirk got shot, before it was really known who it was, while the shooter was still at large, I made a comment on my personal Facebook page grieving his loss, but also saying, hey guys, we don't know who did it. Let's not jump to accusations and blame people. But it was that comment that some of my liberal friends then went off and started attacking me, started accusing me of blaming liberals when I literally said, don't blame liberals. But as the conversation really just escalated, my own liberal friends were kind of justifying the assassination. They weren't full out celebrating it, but they were really justifying it, that he was a bigot, that he was a fascist, Hitler supporter. And then it was as some of my more conservative friends started defending me, again, these liberal friends started attacking them too, and all of us, and started calling us all bigots and fascists and supporters of Hitler, which really internalized it much more. It's bad enough when they're saying that Charlie Kirk deserved to get assassinated because he was a fascist. It's another thing that when they then follow that up with accusing me and my friends of being fascists. Some of these comments I've seen, not comments from my own friends, but comments that have made it popular online, have kind of given a certain hit list of other people. And when some of my own personal friends said that Charlie Kirk's assassination is sort of justifiable because he was a fascist, and then started accusing me and some of my friends of being fascists, it kind of felt like, we were being added to that list. Now, I'm not one to back down when intimidated, but it was definitely a terrifying thing. Just when you see the rationale of that, Charlie Kirk's assassination was justifiable because he was a fascist, well, now you're going to call me a fascist. And I think that is the radical mindset that we just need to be honest with and address with what's going on the left. What's heartbreaking about Charlie Kirk's assassination is that they killed one of the most moderate, the nicest, most polite conservatives there is. What's terrifying about it is that the same justification that they're giving for that would also justify my assassination. And so how are we conservatives supposed to respond to this? Well, that's a question we've got to wrestle with. Again, some conservatives are just straight out calling for retaliation. Some, even like Andrew Tate, I heard, called for civil war. Now, I would not listen to Andrew Tate's advice if he was the last person on earth to take advice from. There is nothing I've seen about Andrew Tate's character that I slightly admire. The guy needs to be in jail and should probably not even have access to the internet with a lot of the stuff he's done, but he does have influence. And even if his is the most radical voice, then that radical response is on the right side also. But here again is really the thing. Andrew Tate is a radical. And there are other radicals on the right. I would consider Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens as radical extremists too. I'd probably consider Doug Wilson to be pretty extreme, although I've only seen a couple of his things. But here's the thing, that radical right does exist. Charlie Kirk was not of that sect. He was a moderate, and they targeted him. He was probably the least deserving of an assassination. But that leads me to my next point, the concern about civil war. Charlie Kirk was not known for going around calling for people's deaths and executions for disagreeing with him. He was known for going into the very heat of the fire and having conversations with people, all the while having a big smile on his face. You could tell he really enjoyed life, and he enjoyed dialogue, and he enjoyed conversing with people. Even at times, people who were just really unbearable. There's a clip going on about somebody asking Charlie Kirk why he does what he does, and he says, it's important that we have civil conversations because otherwise when conversations break down, that's when violence ensues. Charlie Kirk was against violence. He was for conversations, he was for dialogue. And I think these conservatives who are advocating for civil war or advocating for retaliation, they're really doing Charlie Kirk a disservice. They're going against what he stood for. When a man dies, he still lives on in the legacy he left. If we use that legacy to go against things he would have advocated for, man, that's like a second assassination against him. And so this is what I'm calling the conservative dilemma. One of our guys just got assassinated. A lot of our enemies are cheering on that assassination. A lot of our enemies are justifying that assassination. some of our enemies are creating hit lists of who's going to be next. And even some of our own friends, probably you've had this experience too if you're conservative, some of our own personal friends are saying the same things about us that is used to justify the assassination of Charlie Kirk. How do we respond to acts of violence against us, celebrations of violence against us, and justification of violence against us? How do we respond to that? If we do nothing, will they just pick us off one by one? No, this needs to be addressed. We have our rights to our voices, and we have a right to state our voices publicly without fear of being shot at. And the fact that this is getting justified is not something that we can just stand idly by on. But what then do we do? Do we go the route of civil war? In that, we lose also. First, we lose by dishonoring the man who was assassinated. Charlie Kirk would not want civil war. He advocated for peaceful dialogue, not violence. So if we use his death to justify violence, we are giving him the second assassination. Also, now if we retaliate, we've already seen how the media has spun it. The absolute complete liars. But how much more now if we retaliate, if we go into civil war, will they spin that against us? You can guarantee we will be labeled as terrorists. Why? For standing up for ourselves? But that won't matter. The media won't care about truth. But the fact is, the media has power. Because see, there is a silver lining in this. In that, and this is painful to say, but Charlie Kirk's assassination really did start something. It started something in the conservative crowd. So many people who are now going to church, so many people who are now saying they're never going to vote Democrat again, which I don't agree with that notion that you should never vote Democrat again. You know, the world is having a massive awakening because of Charlie Kirk's assassination. So in a way, the liberals have already lost. But if we now retaliate, and they can now spin it in the media that we're a bunch of terrorists, then we're not going to just lose that momentum. We're going to reverse that momentum. And not only will we be killing Charlie Kirk a second time, we will also be making his first death vain. So what do? If we retaliate, we lose. If we do nothing, we lose. This is the conservative dilemma. But there is also a liberal dilemma here. And now I'm speaking to you liberals. The thing you need to realize is that you also have a lose-lose situation in this. If civil war does break out, well, you've got a bunch of rednecks who work 12 hours a day on the farm, who all have guns, and who are used to butchering cows and chickens in order to feed the nation. They're the ones who are feeding you. They're a bunch of hard workers with guns, and who are used to killing animals. Versus you, a bunch of city slickers who, so many of you go vegan, and you've got to have safe spaces everywhere you go. You get mislabeled on your gender, and you throw a tantrum about it. You think a bunch of people who get overly sensitive about their gender are going to stand up against a bunch of people who are hardworking farmers? You think a bunch of vegans who are anti-gun are going to be able to stand up to a bunch of hunters with guns who feed the economy with deer, cow, and chicken that they hunt and kill themselves? If civil war breaks out, liberals, you just have a lost cause. But let's say somehow you guys do win. Well, okay. So you win the Civil War, you get rid of a whole bunch of conservatives or something, and then all of a sudden you just start bringing in a whole bunch of Muslim migrants. What do you think they're going to do to you once they take over? Once they enforce Sharia law in the United States? You guys, a bunch of queer for Palestines. Do you think there are any Palestines for queers? All of you liberals complaining that Charlie Kirk was such a bigot for being against trans people. How do you think the Muslims are going to treat you? And of course, this is all assuming that China or Russia doesn't jump in with our America's weakness during a civil war. So liberals, if you lose a civil war, you lose. If you win, you're just going to get replaced immediately like that. And then all of your ideologies are going to be thrown off the roofs with your queers. This is a war you cannot win. Because even if you win the war, your ideology is gone by the next generation because of what's replacing you. You cannot win. So this is the gravity of the Civil War. Every single American has a lose-lose situation. If conservatives do nothing, we just allow ourselves to get picked off, we lose. If we retaliate, we desecrate Charlie Kirk's legacy, and we become the thing that we're so angry about. But if it does come to civil war, then liberals, well, you guys are now the lose-lose, Because if you lose, then, well, you lose. But if you win, you get replaced by something far worse than us. Right? This isn't Hollywood. This isn't a book. This isn't an exciting fantasy that gears up to the exciting climax where everything breaks out into war. War is not something to be celebrated. War is a terrible thing that must at times happen. We must choose peace as often as it is available for us to choose. We must always prefer peace. No healthy nation celebrates war, especially a war against themselves. So, what do we do? Well, for a start, liberals, you need to take ownership. Stop lying. Stop gaslighting us. You need to take ownership. No, you don't need to take ownership for the death of Charlie Kirk. You're not accountable for one man's actions. We've got radicals on both sides, and sometimes radicals do radical things. Imagine that. But you do need to take ownership, particularly in the rhetoric you're spewing. Stop blaming us. Stop gaslighting us. Destiny says that conservatives need to be afraid to speak in public. Why? Because you disagree with us? That is not a position we can tolerate. Stop gaslighting us. In news media, be honest. Stop saying that Tyler Robinson was a conservative. No, the reports have been clear. His family said the last few years he's been getting more and more political, particularly in his hatred for people like Charlie Kirk. Just because he grew up in a conservative home does not mean that he maintained his conservative views, especially after college. But most importantly, stop with this rhetoric about us being racist, fascist, supporters of Hitler, part of the problem, or a threat to our democracy. What happens when you accuse people of being a threat is radical people will take action against them. We saw that happen to Charlie Kirk. If you label him a threat, you label him a fascist, somebody kills him, you use that to justify it, and then you label the rest of us as threats and fascists. So this is the turning down of the rhetoric you need to do. Stop calling us fascists. Stop calling us racist. Stop calling us a threat to democracy. We're not the ones calling for your assassination because of what you believe. We're the ones seeking dialogue. You're the ones calling for us to be silenced. Which one of these is a true threat to democracy? So liberals, you need to turn down the rhetoric. You all say that words lead to actions. Well, your words are leading to actions. They led to the death of Charlie Kirk. And your words are calling for the death of a few more conservatives. You're the ones who need to turn down the rhetoric. Now, as for conservatives, we need to be more like Charlie. We need to be less like Andrew Tate, Tucker Carlson, and Candace Owens. We need to engage in dialogue. We need to abhor violence. We need to not justify violence. We need to condemn violence. We need to be bold in our convictions, but not in any way call for any form of violence. Islam thrives on punishment for criticizing Muhammad. Liberalism thrives on accusations of bigotry and fascism. So how do you let Islam win? By being afraid to criticize Muhammad. How do you let liberals win? By being afraid of the term racist and fascist and bigot. If we want to stop Islam from taking over the West, if we want to stop liberals from calling for assassinations, we do not give ground. When Muslims kill us for drawing a picture of Muhammad, we need to draw more pictures of Muhammad. When liberals assassinate us for speaking our minds, we need to speak our minds more. We do not give them what they want when they use violence to get it. We do not reward bad behavior. How do you get Muslims to commit more violence? Stop offending them. That's how you get them to commit more violence. How do you get them to stop committing violence? You offend them whenever they act violently. They learn that the more violent they act, the more you disrespect Muhammad, the more you mock their prophet. They don't want that. It becomes a bargaining tool. It's the same way for liberals. If you think shutting up and being silent is going to appease them, you're wrong. You're not going to appease them, you're going to give them what they want. And because you gave them what they want, you've now conditioned them to keep silencing you. Well, instead, when they try to silence you, you need to speak up louder. So then they will be incentivized to stop trying to silence you. Charlie Kirk is now more popular than he ever was. Ironically, his death really was the turning point. Why? Because people are waking up. If every time liberals act out, things go this badly for them, they're going to stop acting out. The liberal ideology is being forced to adapt or to die out. People are becoming disillusioned to it. If we retaliate, they will become disillusioned to us too. So we do not back away, we do not cower, but neither do we retaliate. We stand bold, we stand firm, we stand on our convictions, and we do not allow them to silence us. But one thing we do need to do is that we do need to call out radical conservatives too. People like Andrew Tate who are calling for civil war. We need to call him out. Also, liberals need to call out people like Destiny. Really, both Andrew Tate and Destiny both should be arrested. Destiny for advocating for violence, Andrew Tate for his many sex crimes that he's committed. We need to call out radicals on both sides. Because if tensions continue to escalate, civil war will at one point be inevitable. And lastly, we need to pray for our nation. We are not well right now. We need to pray for our nation, and we need to pray for hearts of individuals. It seems Charlie Kirk's death has led to a great awakening. We were already on the cusp of a great awakening, but Charlie Kirk's death has just really accelerated that awakening. So we need to pray that the Spirit of God moves in this time, and that we can learn to navigate these really complicated times, learn to adapt, and learn to be sensitive to the work of the Spirit. It's times like these that God is always willing to bring unity and reconciliation. In fact, let's open up to a passage in Matthew, where Israel was going through some pretty radical times in their history. In the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 23, in chapter 23, verse 37, Jesus is lamenting over his nation. It says, "Jerusalem, Jerusalem, who kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to her. How often I wanted to gather your children together, the way a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and you are unwilling." You were unwilling. Jesus says, look, you're a people who kill your prophets. Like Martin Luther King Jr., like Charlie Kirk. Jesus is saying, look, I know you have a history of killing the people I send to you, yet still I long to gather you together under my wing. But you're unwilling. If we would be willing, Christ will gather us under his wings. He can bring healing and reconciliation into our broken land. If we are unwilling, learn what happened to Jerusalem in the year 70 AD. Thanks for watching, guys, and God bless.